You are now in the realm of enlightenment and transformation.
Welcome to Chief Speaks.
All music performed and produced by Yu.
Enlightenment comes from allowing yourself to journey through the dark shadow of death, the primordial abyss of wisdom's waters. For it is the treasures and mysteries that lie waiting in the dark that transform us and propel us to a new enlightened state. One should never aspire to live the light nor the dark, but should journey between the two in order to evolve the overall reality into a self-actualized creation. Knowledge is your light, as wisdom is your darkness. The bold interplay of the two in your life leads you to an enlightened understanding of yourself and the universe you've created. Male is your enlightenment, female is your transformation, child is your evolution. Woman, accept the light into your darkness, so it may enlighten you. Man, go bring your light boldly into the darkness so that it may transform you. Enlightenment and transformation.
I love you so much because you just don't know what you've just done for me. Thank you so much.
Wow. This is like the best call I've had in ages on BTR.
So this show was meant for me to be able to hear today, and I'm so thankful.
That's his home.
Therefore, now a new pathway has now been cut in order to get to the Almighty, where there may not have been one. So the communication with them, if they have enough power and strength to talk to us, the communication will be very clear.
That's one of the reasons I don't get into the current events thing too much, because it starts to become a perpetual alarm clock that we just keep hitting snooze on. I speak to the ascended masters, quote unquote. I talk about spiritual stuff, but I also speak about some very practical, we can do today things.
Be as natural as you can be with your spiritual. You can't always go by your feelings, because your feelings are corrupted. Your feelings are just as corrupted as everything else, your chakras and everything else. You got to know what's beyond you, and that's why we have elders. We can't do everything. You can't get everything out of books or weekend certification. You can have the most powerful, ancient, oldest, most, as far as you know, truthful tradition in your hands. And if you still have a dirty spirit, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're not going to learn anything. You're not actually going to grow. I try to teach in a way where I make myself obsolete. That's always been my goal, to make myself obsolete.
I really wanted to, kind of big you up. I think you're awesome.
There's a lot of elders out here right now that want to know what's going on. They're not getting on Twitter and stuff like that, but they want to be up on the new stuff. Sit down and have some conversations with them. It's not always about hearing their story. It's also about being news reporters for them and letting them know, like, yeah, this is what's happening right now. They may tell you something about what happened in Charleston that you couldn't even. Your spirituality has to create sane spiritual family. Okay, and that family exists first inside of you. You have to express the different expressions of that rainbow coalition of spirits inside of you first. Okay, don't let communities hijack that rainbow. The problem is when we come into the conscious community, the dudes are doing the same thing that the women are doing.
I just want to say that I really enjoy your show every Sunday, and my friend and I call it going to church. When we call him, we'll be like, you going to church? And I'm like, where have y'all been at?
God cannot go against its own truth. So anytime you have an inkling that God is going against its own truth, then God is no longer behaving as God. So therefore the spiritual community doesn't recognize God. You dig where I'm coming from? Or can we have a new thought? Can we step outside of the books for a second and have a new conversation about hair weaves and wigs? Can we have a new conversation about homosexuality? Can we have a new conversation about vegan eating? What are we doing? It's a good day for exorcism. Good day for exorcism.
You said I needed counseling, baby, and so I signed up. And here's what the therapist said to me. His own life is messed up, so I asked the preacher to. His response was not much, so I have to conclude. I guess we're all out to lunch, confused and delusional. Understand I'm only human. I am no man. Let's not pretend. Superman. I am no. I'm trying to diagnose all my trauma. What's wrong with me? The doc said it could be trauma from post-slavery. Didn't know it was affecting me. Put my heart's on the table and make no pretense of handling all these problems. And I know I just I can't do this all alone. Please understand I'm only human. You're always making me the bad guy. Let's not pretend that. And I wonder why. Listen, let me tell it all. See, they demoralize me, making me destitute of. Ain't got a love. See, they dehumanize me. I need you to baptize me in love. Yeah, baby. I'm just a normal man, baby. Try to understand me, babe. I ain't crazy.
Peace. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Chief Speaks on Enlightenment and Transformation. I trust and will that you all have had a strong. You started off the week or the strong end strong and not weak. So I want to welcome all of you who are, of course, first-time listeners. This is Chief Yuya, and peace and power to you all. And of course, as always, I like to welcome those of you who are listening in from the archives. Whenever you're listening in, you are just as welcome and just as valid as those who are listening in live right now. So peace to everyone. And I know sometimes the language can sometimes be a little confusing, if you're not used to hearing it, someone saying strong or strong in, but just give some thought to some of the things that are handed to us at times that maybe don't always work in our best interest, and pay close attention to what goes out of your mouth, because your ears are closest to your own mouth, and sometimes you create a endless loop of hexing toxicity through your own phraseology. So when we say we're gonna start the week end, we're weakening ourselves. We're starting to weaken. We're weakening. Start to weaken. So you'd be surprised how easy it is to slip certain things into your vernacular that are not necessarily the best for you to take in. And that's what we want to avoid and really try to heal ourselves from in this day and time. But, of course, every month, as many of you know, we maintain certain themes. And thematically and progressively, we establish certain themes in terms of our learning so that we can put pieces together and become more whole. And our theme this month is the summer solstice. Of course, no, today is not. Thank you, Brother Truman. Of course, today is not the summer solstice, but we are coming into that space of the summer solstice. All right, so it will be later this month, June, that actual solstice, but we're going to deal with some of the value of it, starting now. Thank you as well, Omega, and thank you, Brother Charles Ramos. Working on that. Letting me know for those of you who are listening in. I don't see the chat. They're letting me know I'm breaking up, so I'm working on that now. All right. So willfully, I'm clear now. All right. And if I'm not, just let me know if I'm still breaking up. I'll wait till somebody gives me the all clear. Chief, you're all clear. I'm waiting for the all clear sign. So I know I can continue forward. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just thanking. Thank you. Thanking everybody who said I'm all clear. All right. Yeah. So, thank you. As in usual fashion, our themes, thank you. Our themes are dealing with us moving forward in terms of healing, but becoming whole people again. And, like I said, no, today is not the summer solstice, but it's coming up. And I wanted to properly prepare all of you to the best of my ability. But in any event, the summer solstice is key because it deals with being whole. Being whole. And I know a lot of times when we talk about it or we look at it, we don't address it from that place. It's just, the sun is high and it's, kind of ascended again to its highest apex once again. And all of that is absolutely true. But there's another component to it that's really interesting when you're dealing with the solstice. And of course, throughout the month, we're going to be getting into it and breaking it down and approaching it from different angles and looking at all of the filled points and looking at all of the hollow points, of course, addressing the spiritual sun and also addressing the manifested sun. So we're gonna get all into it. And I know like last month we spent some time really digging into the concepts of Shakti and looking at Shakti and Shiva and the relationship that those energies have to power and consciousness. And as we deal with this solstice vibration, which solstice just means, sun standing still, the stillness of the sun. And I'm going to explain, not only from an astrological and an astronomical perspective, but also from a spiritual and a physiological perspective, what it means to have that sun or that most high to be in a place of stillness, of course. So I want to start with a few things, and like I said, we'll return to a lot of different points as we carry along. And let me just give a quick announcement before we get into the teaching. There will be a men's call today at 1 p.m. All right, men's call at 1 p.m. So all of you, Anu men and ministry members, make sure you get on that call, okay? Especially because this Sunday is, they're all important, because we're always progressing to something new, but this one is doubly important. So carve out some time in your schedule to sit on that call and get in tune with what we're doing and where we're going. You know, there's no chit chat that happens on the men's call. It's all about progress and contribution and standing tall as men and reclaiming our spaces and reclaiming our dominion. All right. So I just want to give that announcement. Now let's get into some of this solstice information. So essentially, I want to start by just really acknowledging the sun, right? Because when we're dealing with the summer solstice, of course, a key piece in understanding what the summer solstice is about, or even the winter solstice is about, one of the key pieces of it is understanding, well, what is the sun? You know, what is the sun about? You know, and of course, many of you may have come out of different spiritual traditions where perhaps maybe your religious understandings were centered around the movement of the sun, you know, or the supposed movement of the sun, and you may have had different celebrations throughout the year that symbolized that particular movement, whether it be the birth of the sun on December 25th, and you know, the resurrection of the sun during the equinox, you know, and so forth and so on. There's so many different things, but what it really signifies is mind mapping and soul journey. That's all it is. Whether you're looking at the studies of Krishna, whether you're looking at Haru, or you're looking at Mithra, or Dionysus, or Atta, you know, or all of the different, or even Quetzalcoatl. Like I was saying earlier before I broke up, you know, well, staticky, before the line got staticky, was that last month we were dealing more with Shakti and Shiva in terms of the relationship between consciousness and power. And so you could almost say that we devoted the power session to conversations around the archetype Shakti. Well, in this one we'll be dealing more with Quetzalcoatl. Okay, so we're going to be dealing more with Mayan, Olmec, and Aztec design in terms of our understandings of the solstice. You know, it goes much further beyond conversations around Yeshua, you know, or the understanding that pyramids were placed in particular angulations, so that way when the sun would set on the solstice, it would set between those pyramids. We'll get into that, but you know, sometimes when we look at the seasonal passing, we use it as a way to either dissect or decode different religious happenings and writings. But the solstice and the equinox celebrations can be found all over the world. There's not a tradition that you can dig into where you're not going to find a celebration of such. You know, there's a great significance in the sun body and in the moon body. You know, in our Yoruba we have Oorun, signifying the sun, also signifying your neck as well. So, you know, when we're speaking about the neck, we're speaking about the transcendental properties that we have, how we rise up. You know, in a sense, it's very similar to the neck or the trunk of a tree, you know, representing transcendence, and the roots representing how we root and our rootage, you know. But we have Oorun, you know, that lets us, you know, connects us to the sun, and there's so many different natural spiritual phenomenon that are given great significance in our Yoruba culture surrounding Oorun. As you're told, it's like heaven, or harem. You know, the word comes from out of Oorun, you know, the harem. But and then we have our moon, which is Osu. You see, so the recognition and the veneration of those great celebrated bodies of moon and sun, or of heaven and earth, are certainly a great part of so many different traditions and the spiritual significance that each one holds in learning about the higher dimensions. So we'll get into it really, really quickly. Just some understanding of the solstice and why it's celebrated, and of course the sun. You know, of course we know during that solstice period, which is usually between June 20th and June 23rd. So again, to reiterate, today is not the solstice. I know some people don't follow those things, so They may have been a little bit confused, but we're discussing it all month. All right, so even though today is not the actual solstice. So like I said, typically celebrated between June 20th and June 23rd. And when we look at the body of the sun itself, we're looking at a star. And the sun is the star of the particular universe that we identify with being in. This is the star of this universe. Okay? So a lot of times, if we don't take some time to really understand sometimes the correlations that we make, we don't really get the deeper, again, higher dimensional spiritual understanding. So just understanding that one thing: sun is a star. It's the only star of our universe. Okay. Sometimes you look in the sky and you say, "Oh, there's so many stars in the universe." No, there's one, the sun. Okay. And the sun, even though we give it the correlation or the relationship with a masculine archetype or a masculine energy, even though we consistently associate it with masculinity, which is not problematic. It's not inherently problematic. It's a good association, but more so because of the way it projects and the way it moves. But essentially, very similar to the moon as well, it is androgynous. The sun is an androgynous entity, as the moon is an androgynous entity. So even though we say things like Mother Moon and Father Sun, which is not wrong, but in certain traditions we say Mother Sun and Father Moon. You see, so there's an understanding of the duality of each. When you look at the sun, you're looking at a very probably the most dynamic entity that we have in the universe, and that I know it appears to be very static from a distance, but it's a humongous, gigantic facility of dynamic movement of plasma and of gases and of course intense heat, of course. And often our understanding of the sun is that it's just a big nuclear bomb. It's an atomic bomb sitting in the sky. And, we're taught through our scientific inklings that it gives off solar radiation, and the solar radiation that we experience from the sun is in fact hundreds of thousands of years, 100,000 years old, specifically. So the sun heat and, that you're experiencing is actually from the ice age. That's what we're taught, because it takes that long to actually get to us. Now, we're also taught generically through our scientific understandings that once the sunlight or the solar radiation hits the Earth's atmosphere, that it takes 8 minutes for it to actually hit the surface. Okay? It takes 8 minutes to go from the atmosphere to surface. That's what we're taught. Okay? Now, within the our new discoverings, that is not necessarily the truths that I hold to. Or I should say rather the facts that I hold to. But, I want to acknowledge what we've been taught first. So sometimes, even the preconceived notions that we have about the sun, like for instance, that it's yellow. The sun is yellow. And you've heard me say many times that anything that burns that hot couldn't possibly be yellow, So there's many different ideas that we've been given, in terms of our astral bodies and our celestial bodies and our astronomical bodies, and how we should approach them and how we should look at them. But the sun is a dynamic, possibly vessel. The sun is a dynamic vessel. Okay. Of course, there's plasma. Of course, there's dynamic movement. There's volcanoes. It's like an ecosystem unto itself. It has a core to it, and the core is extremely dense. The core, it's actually the most dense aspect. But I'm going to give you I've given you the science or the Western science of what the sun is, and basically we have hydrogen and helium. We have hydrogen fusion inside the sun, where you have all of these hydrogen atoms that are essentially smashing. They're randomly moving all over the place. They're smashing into each other. And when they smash into one another, they fuse together to form helium. Okay, so that's the theory that we've been given, in terms of the sun. You have all of this hydrogen smashing together, connecting and forming helium, right? Okay, cool. We'll take that. No problem. So let's look a little deeper. All right. Like you've heard me say before, especially in relationship to light and fire, that if you have light, you have fire. There's no way you can have light without fire. And light, fire, and electricity are all in the same family. They live in the same house with one another. So sometimes we look at the primitive aspects of fire, and then we may look at lightning and look at them as if they're two different entities, and they're really not. They're just different forms of fire. Okay, so in the same instance, you have the sun, and the sun really is it's an electrical transformer. Essentially, it's just because it has magnetic poles inside of it, and every 11 years those magnetic poles switch, because they're moving with such intensity that every 11 years they then turn around and spin the other way. Okay, so I know I did a segment some years ago about Uranus and the serpent of the sun. It would really help you all if you reviewed that actual segment to get a deeper understanding. Okay. Now, Tareem, I'm gonna have to pull you out of the crowd again. I wasn't going to do it, but it's nagging me. Tareem asked, "What are the feminine aspects of the sun?" Tareem, you drive trucks for a living, so you know something about going for the ride, brother. Go for the ride. We're gonna get there. All right, we're only 28 minutes in. We're going to be talking about this all month. Lay back, go for the ride. Okay, everything that I'm sharing with you right now are the things you need to know. Don't jump ahead. All right, so I'm going to say that to Tareem. I'm saying it to you, but I know other people have probably done the same. Say, when's he going to talk about the feminine aspect? I never heard about that. Slow up. Just roll with me, because in fact, if you're listening, I already spoke about the feminine aspects of the sun. I already did. Okay, so you gotta go for the ride, because if you don't, you'll be missing information in between. As soon as you heard me say magnetic poles, you already heard the feminine aspects. As soon as you heard me say it's not static, it's dynamic, you already heard the feminine aspects. Okay, so now I'm going to explain them. I'm going to go deeper, but go for the ride. And that's for all you others out there who are racing ahead. All right, so let's look at the actual possible vessel nature of that sun body. Okay, let's look at that for a second. When we're dealing with that entity, we're dealing with because the sun is an archetype, it's an entity, it's an organic entity. It's aging, and in some instances, you'll have some who will tell you that it's actually dying. Okay, we'll get into that understanding. Go for the ride. Go for the ride. So, for the most part, like I said, you have these magnetic poles inside of the sun. It's a very dynamic entity, and we have understandings such as Ra, and we have understandings such as Amun Ra or Amun Ra, being that hidden aspect. Well, if you ever look at a depiction of the sun, which of course you'll see in the slideshows of this particular segment, if you're watching a YouTube video, you'll see that typically when you look at depictions of the sun, you see these black spots. You'll see this orange and these yellow flames and dynamic movement, but then you also see black spots in between. And scientists, of course, have told us that those black spots are just the effects that the movement and the dynamic, dynamic movement of the actual sun. It's the effect that it has on the camera lens, and in the telescope lenses, it creates those dark spots, right? And then you have others who have said that actually the sun is hollow. And those dark spots are you seeing the hollowness of the holes inside the sun. Okay, so there's different theories as it relates to the sun's movement. But the thing is, if you look at some of our ancient wording in scriptures, whether from the Quran Torah, to Ifa, it gives you some hints as to the actual composition of the sun. No need to apologize, Doreen. I'm referencing the chat as I'm talking. Going for the ride. So, we have an understanding there, and if we can understand the dynamics of the sun, it'll help you to understand more dynamics of masculinity. As we did last month, we spoke about power primarily. Power as it expresses itself through, its connection to the source, or its being the resource or the raw source. We understand that power without consciousness is disorder, right? And in fact, it can almost become, strong mind, strong body fitness, as well as Louisa. Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna give YouTube a run for its money today. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Willfully that cleared it up. And thank you, Jennifer H. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so it might have cleared up. It should have cleared up by now. But and just give me the all clear for this. Still okay. I think it's a delay. All right, let's see. Cracking up again. Somebody's breaking up. It's cracking up. Clear now. Thank you. Yeah, it's like maybe a 30-second or 40-second delay between you hearing me and everything. But thank you, everyone, for letting me know. So yeah. So if we look at the design and function of the sun, and I'm going to get into as we travel forward, I'm going to get into some of the texts pulling from the Bhagavad Gita, as well as the some of the ancient Mayan writings, as well as the Quran. I'm going to take you through some of the Shiite understandings of the sun and how it works and how it really folds in on itself. And the dynamics, from my understanding, that we see in the sun are really the communication that it's having with its blackened source. What is its blackened source? Amun-Ra, of course. Okay, so as it fluctuates in and out of that dimension, you see, and pulling information from that other dimension. Now, interesting, breaking up again. Are you sure I'm breaking up again, or are you guys on a delay? I think you're delayed. I think. Okay, so everyone has a different level of delay. I think it was breaking up a moment ago, but I believe we fixed that issue. So I think it's just some of you are delayed. I'm pretty sure. But so you have a fluctuation with the sun where it's pulling from apparent to unapparent. Okay, so it's pulling from what we're seeing and then pulling back and grabbing information or grabbing current or grabbing energy from Amun-Ra. And in that process, you can see now on your screen, depiction image, you see those black holes. The black holes, in my summation, are Amun-Ra. Or as scientists like to say, or some theorists, astronomers are saying now that the sun is actually hollow. I don't think it's hollow because they don't have an understanding of dark energy, or even junk DNA or Oduduwa or Amun-Ra. You see, or Amun. Let's just say Amun or Amun. That hidden aspect where power is pulled from. You see. So in that instance, you start to realize the sun just really represents an electrical transformer. So the sun itself is not the heat, but in fact, the pulling through dimensions, going back and forth between Amun and this, and what's in here in this dimension of what's seen, is what's creating the solar radiation, is what's creating the heat, or they even speak about the solar flares, and all of the different, because there are consistent storms and volcanic eruptions on the sun. So it's like it's its own ecosystem. That sounds, I know we look at it like it's just a big ball of fire. But there's so much more going on. You even have inside, you have plasma, and within the plasma, inside of the sun, you have these granules, and these granules are like, just to give you perspective, the granules themselves are like the size of a large state. I'm trying to pick a state. Let's say Oklahoma or Montana. to give you a sense, and you have millions and millions of these granules inside, of its plasma core. So, it's a huge star in that sense, right? But it's a dynamic space. So it's not just a space where you have all of this pushing out of light or pushing out of energy. It's a space where you have all of this retrieving of electricity, this retrieving of information, this retrieving of fire, you see. So the sun itself, it's the actual entity of it itself. And, in our ancient writings, the sun was always considered the demiurge, or the lesser deity, the lesser god. And the sun behind it, the hollow sun, was actually considered to be the real sun. So that which was not seen was actually considered to be the real one, and that which was seen was just considered to be the lesser form. Well, we discussed that recently, didn't we? In our strong day shows, where we were speaking about, by time something becomes apparent, then we've already received the negation of what it actually is. You see, so very similar to you, when you're going back and forth and you're doing spiritual work, or you're praying, or you're affirming, or you're meditating, and you're bouncing back and forth between the unseen and the seen. Now, you see this particular slide that's currently playing right now? Here, let me do this. For those of you who are watching, I'm going to pause it. I'm going to pause the slide, not the show. So if you look at that current slide, that NASA slide, you see a flare coming off of the what we'll call the surface of the sun. But that's not really so much the surface, that's the atmosphere. Because again, the surface would be more where that plasma core is, or the hollow core, right? So you see that flare itself. Our ancients told us that was the spit, or the serpent, you see. So that flare itself is the dynamics. It's the chaotic aspect, because the sun is a very chaotic environment. You see, it's very chaotic. So you already start to see, if there's chaos, there's a woman around. Or if there's chaos, there's a feminine archetype or a feminine energy that's somewhere close by. So the very lashing out, or the very sending of that flare, as you're seeing it right there, you start to realize, okay, well, something is sending that forth. Now, in my theorem, those flares occur whenever there is a pull to gain more power or more ashe from Amun, or from another dimension. And recently, scientists have started to entertain that theory with seriousness, that the sun is actually pulling its strength from another dimension. You see, they've just now started to acknowledge that that's a possibility. But our ancestors told us that a very long time ago, right? Very long time ago. So I'm going to get more into the nature of the sun, but I wanted to speak about just maybe some of the myths that we have surrounding this archetype and this energy that we call the sun, and how some of that mythology maybe confuses some of the deeper understanding that we can have about it when we start to get deeper into the mythology. You see, so it's always good to have your basis in the truth first. Sometimes we jump right to the abstract, or we jump right to the mythology, and we don't even know what we're talking about, really. So the sun is a dynamic environment of masculine and feminine, and an interplay between masculine and feminine. So how is this related to the solstice? Well, of course, the solstice, sol, and stis is still, stillness. So it's the stillness of the sun. But I'm going to explain. When we're working with the solstice energy, whether it be the winter solstice or the summer solstice, but more specifically the summer solstice, we're dealing with the symbology of awakening, or celebrating the light that's inside of us. And, when you do it in a festive way and it's celebratory and you're amongst many people, then you're celebrating the light inside of everyone. But more specifically, you're celebrating, chopping back up again. This is weird. This Sunday there. Yeah, let me do it like this. They're doing us real dirty this Sunday on YouTube. Okay, hopefully that cleared everything up. All right. So the idea here again, when we're celebrating that solstice, remember when I said earlier in the segment that we're celebrating the wholeness, becoming whole again. So the conquest, or really what we're speaking about, is the climax of the light or the climax of the journey of the sun, you know, throughout what it goes through the year, you know, is really the journey of us obtaining enlightenment. And from the moment that we obtain enlightenment, what we're doing is essentially returning to the source of where we came from, or the resource. We pull resources for enlightenment. Well, what is resource? Again, I've said this many times. I'm going to say it again, though. You have source, which are your origins, and you have re or ra, which is light, or to return to where you came, to do again. You see? So what are we doing again when we resource? What are we doing again? We're going back to our origins or our commencements of creation. You see? So it's like going back into the womb, you know, the womb of the mind, you know, or the womb of your creation. You see? So what we experience through the solstice, or the enlightenment that we experience through the solstice is a rewinding or resourcing of the creation process. You see, so that way we can spring forth again. Now, how do we know that? Okay, well, because it's easy to figure out. But aside from that, if we even look at our Kemetic instruction, right, and you know, we look at the Great Pyramids in Kemet, we see they were designed and positioned in a way so that way when the solstice came, or the summer set on the solstice, the sun would set directly between those two pyramids. You see, it would set directly between those two pyramids. You know, so what that represents is that sun going back into the beginning, or the early, or the commencing stages of its own creation. You see. So the solstice is not just about, you know, it's hot out and our pineal, because we always like to run to the pineal. The pineal is active. The first eye is well, people say the third eye. The third eye is active. It's about our celebration of climaxing of our enlightenment. So now we can return to the source, you see, and then we can begin our journey again of enlightenment. So you remember, like I always tell you, that this journey is about information collecting. You're grabbing things, you know, as you're journeying through the year, we could say, or journeying throughout the earth. And as you're journeying throughout the earth, you're collecting data. And then once you collect your data, when you transition or you transform, you bring that data back to the source. So you bring that data back to Oorun. You see, so the solstice represents a time where we become whole again, because through our journey through life, sometimes we take on certain tools and take on certain armaments, and sometimes parts of us that are vital and necessary become chipped away. You see, because of the trauma of going through life, you know, the pain and some of the stress and the disorders that we go through as a process of going through our manifestation beyond creation, but our manifestation. So when we return back to the source, we return back to those abysmal pools of healing. You see, when that sun sets on that solstice, you know, so we're rising to our climax, we're rising to the apex of our enlightenment, but then we're going back to the source of creation. So you have an interplay there between creation and enlightenment, you see. And when we're pulling back or falling back down into that, what we're doing is we're rewinding the process. If you can look at the process of a baby or a child being created, and then reverse it, where everything goes back before it negated itself, and it goes back into its whole state. You see, that's I'm giving you the cursory science, and I'm going to break it down, you know, as we go, with different texts, and you know, even some astronomical information for you to understand that a little bit more. But essentially what we're speaking about is that time when we go forth into our highest form, you see, and we celebrate the journey. We celebrate the trials, we celebrate the fights, we celebrate the things that we've lost, we celebrate the things that we've gained. We celebrate it all during the solstice, because we've known where we are right now is as high as we're going to go for right now, until we return to the source again and re-up. You see, so it's a time for when you're really recognizing it's time to reset. So very similar. This is why I gave you the example of the movement, of the push and pull dynamics, of and the magnetic, interplay that happens within the body that we call the sun. There's a constant pulling from another dimension and then sending out, and that's what we call the solar flares. And those every 11 years you get more solar flares, excuse me. But every 11 years is when you have those magnetic poles turning the other way. They're moving in one direction, let's say clockwise. And then every 11 years, from the immense movement, they turn the other way and they go counterclockwise. And during that time, you have all of these flares that shoot out. Okay, you have all of these flares that are leaving the space. And again, our elders, of old, often called those the serpents, that the sun would spit out different serpents, right? Well, once you understand that the chaotic and the dynamic aspect of those serpents, you start to also see the feminine attribute or the feminine nature of the sun in that sense. Why? Because what are serpents essentially? Why do we associate dragons with femininity? And even though you could look at a serpent and say, well, the serpent is a phallus. In some traditions you will say, okay, well, no, the serpents are actually, they're symbolized or symbolism for the male phallus. You could do that, but you lose a lot because you very rarely see a serpent stiff. There's always an angle, there's always a curve, there's always a dexterity, you see, and fluidity to the way its body moves. But more importantly, what you see is that it moves around on its belly for the most part. So at all times, its body is in contact with the earth when you're dealing with that serpent vibration. So this is why you had in ancient times, there was on the crown, not only was serpent worn, but the vulture was also worn. And in certain places, you also had the bee, because the bee always represents the refinement of a civilization. When they get to the point where they're beekeeping, it's representative of something. But the serpent on the crown represents that connection to that feminine element. The serpents or the solar flares that come out of the sun represent that I've connected to the spiritual, to the feminine element, and now I'm sending that information back out. Now I'm going back out. And we feel that intense heat that comes. Sometimes those solar flares will shut down the electrical environment, the electrical, devices on the earth, which happened in 1982. You can look that one up. That's an easy one to find. But so what you're essentially seeing there is the effects of the feminine dynamics there. And when you look at the serpent, like I said, the serpent is moving on its belly, and its entire body is always touching the earth. So it represents its connection to the earth, or its connection to its feminine vibration. You see. So a lot of times when we look at the dragon, we'll and it's just different reasons why too, but we'll look at it like, okay, the dragon is feminine, it's moving around, even though it flies. So when it's flying, it's like the combination of the vulture and the serpent, or the eagle and the serpent. You see. And we'll get into the feather aspect, because the feathers are essential, in terms of our understanding what the solstice is, what those feathers represent. But let's go back just to the esoteric traditions for a moment, and why that summer equinox becomes so important. Essentially, it represents us ascending out of the different gates and the different trials and the different, as I say, chambers of our human experience, and rising above them for a moment to realize the fullness of taking inventory of the fullness of enlightenment that we've received up until that point, and celebrating it collectively. That's why you had so many solstice celebrations amongst groups of people, you see, because we're celebrating, us being the unspoken hero in a sense, or like you look in the book of Eli, Solara, solar hero, solar Haru, Solar Haru, being that Haru, that solar Haru, or that hero that was, that came forth in the dark or came forth during the winter, but then was resurrected in the spring, and it's gone through this journey of ascension that we recognize now in the summertime. You see, coming to the full ascension. So we're celebrating what we've achieved during this time. We're taking inventory and we're looking back and we're saying, okay, man, I started maybe the year out with this issue or that issue, and I was struggling in this area, struggling in that area. And, you know, maybe I lost some friends along the way. I might have lost some relatives along the way, but that ascension and me moving beyond and all of those different things is actually completely connected to my return. I can't ascend without resourcing or without returning. Now, this becomes significant when we start to look at some of our concepts in terms of nation building and our concepts of enlightenment and moving forward as awakened individuals. And sometimes we look at how much we want to do alone, you know, especially when we speak about community rearing and community building. And like I said, as last month, I was primarily talking to the women through our understandings of Shakti and our understandings of power. Much of what I'll say in this month is dealing with the masculine element, but you all have a pineal. So it's not like, you know, you don't have your own personal sun. You all do. You all have a pineal, you know, or what we call the Ori Iwaju. So, like I said, there's been times I've spoken to different students, and those students will say, you know, arrogantly, I'm listening to my Ori. You know, I know what I'm doing. I'm listening to my Ori. I don't have to listen to you. I'm listening to my Ori. But the sad part is, in many instances, that they have no clue what their Ori is. You know, they have no clue as to how the Ori connects to that sun environment or that sun atmosphere, and even and then how it collects to the cellular makeup. You know, how they all work hand in hand in a key sense. So you start to see that when you're ascending and you're resourcing, you're ascending into enlightenment, masculine, but you're only ascending into enlightenment, the masculine, because of how you've been able to resource. Oh, it's okay, Mama Sadaka. Yeah, I thought it should have been clear. She was saying that her connection was the issue. You've only been able to ascend and kind of spring forward, you know, into that masculine because you've been able to resource in the feminine. You see, so during that solstice is when you go back and resource into that feminine to be whole and complete again. Complete again means perfect. To re-perfect yourself so that you can go back out on your journey and do what? Corrupt yourself. So it's a constant process of going through light, going through a journey in its own spiritual nature, and, you know, almost being damaged to a degree, you know, almost having that light going out pure, but then as it goes through its journey through life, it establishes different colors. It picks up different characters. It picks up different colors, and then once it picks up all of the colors that its consciousness can sustain, representative by, again, the ascension during that solstice, it sets back into the abysmal waters. It sets back into that space of unification, you see, and then rises again. So when we speak about the collective solstice rituals and getting together with people and doing things as a group, whether it be Ramadan, whether it be just group spiritual celebrations or group water rituals, what you're essentially doing is you're renewing the sacred fire that's inside of you, but collectively. And you're resourcing collectively. You know, you're recognizing the powerful light that enlightens the group. Because, you know, you're taking a bunch of torches and you're putting them together ceremonially, using it again. Well, you know what I'm saying, you know. So you're doing that in a sense where everyone is coming together through ceremony and through group ritual in that sense, and you're acknowledging the individual light and how it creates heaven, through the collective light. So very similar to again, like I spoke about in Buddhism, when you have the Bodhisattva, you're not necessarily creating new Buddhas when you come into your space of enlightenment. You're creating the Buddha. So when we get together on a collective level and we're celebrating that solstice on a collective level, we're creating the deity. We're creating the Olodumare, we're creating Ra, but we're creating these high deities that we're speaking of, and we're acknowledging that now it is time for all of us to set back into the waters again. And this is our opportunity to become complete and whole again. Okay. This is our opportunity to do that, so it's a time to celebrate our conquest. It's a time to celebrate our victories because we've made it. You see, sometimes I almost caught his bug. Yeah, Anwar likes to play with word pronunciation sometimes. Yeah, you know what happens. But ceremonially, something just doesn't feel right as I'm saying it. It's not rolling off my tongue right, But essentially, what we're doing in those moments is we're acknowledging the primacy of the mother. And we're acknowledging the strength of the father in order to withstand and stand and have the force to pull power from the mother. You see, and the mother is celebrated because she's evidenced by the movements and the dynamics and the flaring of the father. You see, so that's why when I say that, when you're looking at the sun as an entity, I know often we'll look at it and we'll say, oh, the sun is masculine, ceremoniously. There we go. Yeah, why did I forget the S? Thank you, Jennifer. Ceremoniously. That's right. That's why I wasn't rolling off my tongue right. I knew I was saying something. I was leaving the S out. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So like I was saying, what we start to see in that sense, is there's an interplay between light and dark, or unseen and seen, or Amun and Ra. There's an interplay. So we're celebrating not only the masculine aspects of our victory and our achievements and our conquest, where we've overcome the darkness of our journey, but we're also celebrating the divine darkness that we've been able to pull our strength from, and acknowledging that we have to go back to that place to resource. So important. So important. You see, that's what keeps the sun from burning out. The sun is a very old entity. The sun is old school. It's not a young star. So in that sense, we wonder, well, what keeps this star sustained for so long? How is it able to last and to essentially not burn out? With all of this immense heat that I don't even say generate, because it doesn't really generate the heat, but all this immense heat from the friction that it pulls from. Why is it that it doesn't really burn out? Well, because it renews itself, it refreshes itself, it changes its vibration every 11 years. 11 years of the gateway. I don't have to teach you about the 11 at this point. I think you've got enough on that, right? And then we start to see why in our Dogon systems, we have these twins. And, I'll get into the serious mysteries, because it's important to understand that the Nummo, remember I did the show teaching you about the Nummo and that whole Dogon creation story, how in those stories that the Nummo were actually symbolized by the sun, and the sun was considered to be a feminine symbol in that tradition. You see, so there was androgyny there. They had the sun, as they called Ne, and that's why Ne is red, or the feminine, you have that red color which is used, but the androgyny there pulling back and forth, you see, of the Nummo, one of some of your oldest creation myths. Okay, and the value there too is that they were spirits of the water. Now remember, you have water or plasma inside of the sun. You have rivers of plasma. You see. So there's a fluidity that exists inside of the masculine element. It's a very dynamic vessel, very, very dynamic vessel, that sun. You know, it's not just a big ball of fire shooting down heat and you know, burning our skin. But in fact, there's an interplay of fluid in that space. There's an interplay of gases in that space. It's really a very complete being in that sense. But you have fluid, you have gases, and you know, you have all of this different movement, and then you have an unseen aspect where it's really just pulling from different dimensions. So it essentially functions as a step down transformer for all of the power that's coming through it through Amun, very similar to Eshu or Eshu or Jesus. Remember, just put the J on the front of Eshu and put the S on the back. You get Jesus, you know, or Jesus, like Halo or Halal. I'll break that down later. Don't worry. There is a deep connection between Halal and Zeus and Jesus or Jesus, but I'll save that. Okay, but you start to realize that, okay, well, they say, well, you know, Eshu, Legba, is the holder of Ashe. Well, he's the holder of power. So essentially, he's a step down transformer. You know, he distributes it based on how we can handle it. Well, you start to understand the scene or the demiurge sun that exists, or Oorun, the Oorun that we can visualize, because you have Oorun and then you have Oorun, right? The seen and the unseen, or the seen and the spirit of what is seen. The scene is only providing and for those of you who don't know about electrical engineering, let's just say a filter or a buffer, almost like a dam, if you can picture that. You have this huge body of water that would just come through and flood you, but then you have a dam that slows it up. And you can actually use, once you create a dam, you can slow it up, and then you can use the power that's generated from the water that's coming and how you're able to control it. You see, or if you have a filter, something wants to come through real fast, and you cover it with something so it comes through slower. All right, so just to make it very simple, that's what your sun is. You see, it's holding back the deluge of power, or the flooding of power that Amun or Oduduwa would flood you with. You see, so you want to look at that in terms of your own growth and development, and how necessary it becomes to pull back and go back into that sacred water space, you know, to recharge. Because if not, you burn out. And when you come out of that sacred space of recharging, what it really represents is you becoming whole again. So take inventory in your life, in your world, especially as the year has transpired, and look at some of the things that you may have lost that you still need. You know, of course, we drop things off that we shouldn't have anymore. Of course, you know, there's excess that falls to the side. Absolutely, of course, you know. But there are certain things that are needed. There's certain armaments and arsenal that are needed for our journey to carry forward. And sometimes it's important to look at maybe what, as we were running, what tools we dropped along the way. Some of the things that perhaps we may have used at a certain time to recharge that we just stopped investing in. We just began to ignore, you know, some of the things that actually symbolized our power, or symbolized and helped us to, you know, whether it be through festivity or whether it be through serious ritual work, but that brought dignity to the journey that we've lost. You see, this is our time to look at that. And when we go back to the source, when we resource, when that sun sets, we go back and say, okay, we go back into the closet, almost like, you know, the supply closet. All right, I need some of this, need some of that, need some of that. So this is your opportunity to start to add up the things that you're going to manifest. You know, pull those things from the dark and say, okay, I you know, these are all the different things that I'm going to require on this journey. You see, and I'm going to get into more of how we do that, and what that looks like, and how we pull out that consciousness within ourselves, and more importantly, how we pull out that consciousness within others, and really celebrate our ascent and recognize that there has been ascent. Because if you've made it to this point, then that means there has been an ascent. If the sun is experiencing a solstice, that means you're experiencing a solstice, because there's the law of correspondence that's there. You see, you really, you can't get away from it. So there's certain gates that you've gone through, and you may have come through whole, or you may not have. But now is your opportunity to recomplete yourself, or complete yourself again, so that you have that solidarity, and that you can become a transformative force once again, because you have solidarity. All right. That's your lesson for this Sunday. I'm going to head out. You see, I'm keeping my time as it should be. And I also don't want to step on the men's call. So if any of you brothers need to do anything prior to, so you can be prepared, I'm giving you that time. But recognize that what we're going to be dealing with this month is coming into full self-actualization and realization by returning to the source of our creation. And as we're coming into enlightenment, enlightenment pulls us further away from creation. That's the point. And creation pulls us back to the source. So as we've come fully realized and fully in enlightenment, we have to take the time now to go back into our source of creation by rewinding the creation process. You see, so as the sun rises out of those two pyramids, now we're putting the sun back in between the thighs, in between the legs of those two pyramids. All right. So I'll see you very soon for classes, sadoodlehouse.com. Until such time, this is Chief Yuya signing out. Peace.